Hello, welcome to Cal State Fullerton's Career Center Interviewing for a Real Job webinar featuring Kim Martin.
Hi there, I'm a talent acquisition manager with Enterprise Rent-A-Car. I've been with the company 23 years and I've been recruiting now for 16 years. With that, I do about 40 interviews a month, so I see quite a bit of behavior out there, good behavior as far as interviews are concerned, and poor behavior as well. So I hope to bring our expertise from Enterprise in conjunction with the Career Center to help you guys in how to interview for a real job. One of the first things I want to talk about is there are some red flags in interviewing. A few of them are people are dressed inappropriately. I certainly have seen that. They're not prepared for the interview. They bring their cell phones and other electronic devices with them. My best recommendation is just turn it off before you get into the interview. Not sending a thank you note, and also discussing compensation before a job offer is extended. So that's something we're going to talk about a little bit later as well. There are definitely different types of interviews. There's always the screening interview. Phone interview is something that happens quite a bit, and you should treat that as a face-to-face interview. We'll talk more about that as well. One-on-one interview, I'm sure many of you have either seen or been on panel interviews. There's also a lunch interview, and video is certainly something that we're seeing a lot more of, especially when it comes to interviewing via Skype. So as we prepare for the interview, it's really important to talk about how to dress. I always err on the side of being more conservative. If you do know the dress code, you can try to dress on what they recommend, but my recommendation would be to wear a suit to every interview. You can learn later in the interview process if they're more of a business casual company, then you could dress more business casual. The difference would be if perhaps you're going for a company that might be very casual, like Oakley or something to that effect, where it might be, almost not good to come in a suit. That would be the difference, but that's where you're going to really need to do your research. As far as what a great interview outfit looks like, you can see on this slide, the men have a dark suit, white shirt, colored shirt, you've got your tie, you should have a shiny shoes, dark socks, make sure you're clean shaven. Women, you can wear either pantsuits or skirt suits, either one is professional. It's best to wear a heel. Stockings are optional, but you want to wear a blouse that looks nice, it's not too low cut, make sure your hair looks nice, conservative earrings, conservative jewelry. Some additional items that really tie that whole professional look together is having a padfolio. That's my favorite. If you come to an interview with a padfolio, it shows you've done your research, it shows you mean business, and the bonus is you get to have a notepad to take notes, and that's something that I highly recommend. Is there will be an opportunity when you ask questions. It's great to say, hey, you know what I prepared last night? I have some questions prepared. Would you mind if I take out my notebook and ask those questions and take notes? And employers really appreciate that because it shows that you're prepared and it shows that you're very professional.
Great, thank you, Kim. And also just to interject, I think it's perfectly fine to check in with your Career Center college career specialist, especially as you're thinking about interviewing for various industries, whether it be a summer job, a part-time job, an internship, or your first professional job. It's very important that you dress the part. So definitely consult with your college career specialist here at the Career Center. Now we're going to talk about some interviewing 101 tips. So as you prepare for your interview, you definitely want to prepare the day before by making sure that you have your professional attire ready, making sure that it fits well, that you're comfortable in that attire that you'll be wearing for that interview. Even though you probably already submitted a resume to that employer that you're interviewing, it's always a good practice to bring multiple copies of your resume because you never know if maybe you're meeting with the panel or if you're not sure. Maybe their Xerox copy machine went out that day and they don't have extra copies for all the individuals that you'll be meeting with. You may be asked to fill out an application or formal paperwork, and it's best to have that resume handy with you so that you can pretty much transfer that information to any type of application that you may fill out. In addition, if by any chance you submitted your resume months before, or a couple weeks before, and now you've added additional experience to your resume, you can always say, Kim, I actually have an updated copy of my resume. Would you like to see it? Most of the time, employers would be happy to accept your updated resume.
Absolutely.
You also want to make sure that you have accurate directions to where you're going. It's very important to be your interview on time. It's very difficult to redeem yourself from interviews once you've showed up late. So do a test drive if you have. I know Kim has a good business practice of test driving a few days before during the same time that you'll be driving to the interview, because driving there on the weekends might be very different to the traffic that you may come upon during the week. So make sure that you leave enough time to get there and make sure that you know exactly where you're going. It's also very important that you ask who you'll be interviewing with. If you walk up to the front desk and say, I have an interview, I'm not sure who it's with, that's not going to set the best example or best first impression. Make sure you have a clear understanding if you might be meeting, for example, with Kim Martin or Kim Martin's team, or what type of interview you'll be having or encountering. It's also really important that the night before you do your research, that you look at the job description and research the organization. We don't always know what kind of questions might be asked during an interview, but the best cheat sheet I find is a job description. Also, doing your research on the organization that you'll be interviewing with for that interview. Absolutely know your resume front and back so that you don't have to refer to it during an interview. It will certainly exude that you're confident about what you have to offer and that you know about your experience. So make sure that you know what you have placed in that cover letter and that resume that you submitted to your employer. Also, get a good night's sleep. It's really important that you rest and that you are enthusiastic for that interview the next day, and that you seem that you're really interested to be there to meet with that employer.
And if I could add, I had an interview this morning actually, and he did a few things wrong that we discussed here. For one, his interview was scheduled for tomorrow at 9 a.m., but he showed up at my office today at 9:15. So first of all, he was 15 minutes late for an interview that was scheduled for tomorrow. So he got the date wrong. Fortunately, I did have time to meet with him, and I went ahead and did that. Not all employers are going to do that. So keep that in mind. If you don't pay attention and make a mistake, you may lose that opportunity. But in addition to that, he had not brought his resume with him either. When I had asked if he had one, he said, oh, I didn't know that I needed to bring one. No one told me to. So this was a candidate who certainly got many of these things wrong. So make sure you very much pay attention to all the details that the recruiter is giving you, and pay attention to the time, location, and date so that it's accurate. And I know Liz has had an example before when she's been interviewing where someone showed up at the wrong time as well, and the person did not meet with them. So you can lose out on that opportunity.
Correct. So the day of the interview, as Kim already discussed, you want to make sure you dress to impress, play the part. Everybody knows that you should, be at your best for your interview. And when you don't dress the part, employers might be thinking, how much worse can it get? Absolutely arrive early and on time, and make sure you arrive on the right day. That's very important as well. On average, even if you arrive 30 minutes early or an hour early, sit in your car, relax, practice. But traditionally, you want to arrive to that office where you'll be meeting with your employer about 10 to 15 minutes early. I think that's a good time period. You don't want to arrive too early, because then they might feel like they might need to entertain you. So I think a good time period to arrive is about 10 or absolutely turn off all your social media and devices and cell phones so that you are not tempted to be on your phone as you're waiting in the waiting area. Because definitely you're on stage the minute you drive into that parking lot. So turn off all your cell phones and other electronic devices so that you can set a good impression. In addition, be nice and courteous to everyone. This is highlighted and in caps here in this presentation because it's crucial. The minute you step into your car and you start driving, to that interview, you want to make sure you're nice and courteous to everyone, because you never know who you're parking next to. You never know who you're riding the elevator next to. And that front desk person is very crucial in that hiring process. Oftentimes myself, and I know Kim has talked about how, our front desk coordinator, receptionist has a huge influence as well as far as first impression. So make sure you're nice and courteous to everyone, and that you smile the day of the interview. Because as employers, we want to make sure that you're excited about the opportunity, just as we're excited to match the needs of the position you have to offer. Traditionally, when you start interviewing, you want to spend about 1 to 2 minutes max per answer. Anything over 2 minutes does get a little lengthy, And even though it doesn't sound like a long time, it really is quite enough time to get some examples in. So make sure that you practice interviewing and that you provide succinct answers with examples that are about 1 to 2 minutes max. As we talked about, make sure that you bring extra copies of your resume because you never know when you need it, and it just shows that you're prepared. You may also bring a list of references so that in the event they ask for them, you have them handy, or if, as we stated earlier, you need to fill out an application. Do not ask about salary. This is a faux pas. It's kind of a universal rule. An employer wants to make sure that you are able to, number one, sell yourself first, make sure that you're the right candidate for the position, and that, we all know we need to get paid, but salary shouldn't be the first question that you start asking. Make sure you wait till an employer brings up the salary question before you start engaging in that conversation. Always, in addition to making a strong closing, make sure you ask questions at the end of the interview. That shows that you are prepared to ask questions, that you're interested in the employer, that you're interested in the job description or the job that you'll be interviewing for. But it also shows that in some cases that you've done your research. So make sure that you ask informed questions that are not as obviously stated in a job description or on a website, but also make sure that you ask, when the next step in the interview process. Thank them with a handshake, and also thank them with a follow-up letter or email same day or next day. That shows professionalism. It shows that you're serious. And it also shows that you know the job search etiquette.
Absolutely. So during the interview, it's important that your greeting, you have a firm handshake. A handshake really gives you a lot of confidence. It shows that you're serious about this position. You're smiling. You're going to be exchanging information during the interview. That's when the employer is going to be asking you about your background, asking behavioral questions to determine whether you have the skill set to do the job. It's your opportunity to shine. It's your opportunity to share your background and relate it to the skill set that they're looking for. And then the closing is so, so important. I can't tell you how many times candidates do not close. They forget to ask questions, which is also a pet peeve, as Liz mentioned. Always have questions, but a lot of times they don't ask for the job. And that's the part that's so important. It does you no harm in asking for the job. There's many ways to close, which certainly you can get some tips from the Career Center on. But one of the greatest things you can ask is, based on what you've heard from me today, I'm very interested in this position, and do you have any concerns about the ability for me to be able to do the job? So that's one way you can close, and then it gives them the opportunity to tell you if they have concerns. So closing is very important to the interview process.
Perfect, thank you. Also, during the interview, you want to make sure you engage with the employer, that you're present, and that shows how enthusiastic you are to be there to meet them, to showcase your skills and abilities as it pertains to the job. So these are just some basic 101 tips. Make sure you make good eye contact with that person who's interviewing you or the individuals that are interviewing you. There might be times where there might be a panel, so you want to make sure that you engage with everybody and that you make great eye contact with everyone. Try to make sure that you're sitting up straight, that you have your hands either on your lap or on the desk. Don't fidget with, your hair or your clothes or jewelry. Try to avoid those distractions. Another professional etiquette is to not place your belongings on the employer's desk. So make sure that you don't come into an employer and just, dump your purse on their desk or whatever you may have. It's okay to use your Padfolio and place it on the desk or on your lap. But as far as any additional items, make sure you sit them next to you by your seat. Obviously, do not drink or chew gum during the interview. If an employer asks you or offers you water, that's perfectly fine. But be conscientious of things that might spill during the interview process.
All right, so now we're going to talk about some of the types of questions that are asked during interviews. Most of the time, they're behavioral-based interview questions, which we'll discuss more detail in a minute. And yes, there are questions that are illegal that employers should not be asking you. And some of those pertain to perhaps if you're married, if you have children, your race, religion, all of that is irrelevant. So you want to keep in mind that when you're asking questions and answering questions, make sure your answers are job related An employer should be doing the same, asking you questions that are job related. And if there's a question that you're uncomfortable with, it is okay and appropriate, especially if it's not a legal question, to not answer it, because you shouldn't have to do that. There will be tough questions, a lot of questions about strengths and weaknesses, and behavioral type questions, and we're going to run you through how to answer some of them. So first of all, to prepare for the obvious, you need to know yourself. You need to know what your interests are, your skills, what your goals are. I always ask, what's your 5-year goal? I expect a fairly direct answer. It's different to say, oh, I'm not quite sure. I'm just kind of seeing where it takes me. That's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a directed answer. Even if you don't know the specific position, I'm looking for, I have an interest in doing this. I want to be in this level by such and such a date, or I want to be in a management role, or whatever it is you want to do. Make sure you understand what you want to do first, and that's going to help you better in the interview. Knowing your skills, knowing your strengths and your weaknesses. Now, I personally do not ask your greatest weakness question because I don't think it brings a lot of value, since I think candidates have difficulty answering that. But a lot of employers will ask that, and we'll talk about that a little more in detail. You should definitely know your accomplishments and your achievements and how to quantify your results. That's something that employers are looking for. We know you have job duties. We know that you have goals, but tell us how you reached those. Tell us what you accomplished. Your employment history, you need to really understand that and make sure you can articulate it. And especially if you haven't been in a job very long, you need to explain why. You also need to talk about your education and training and know your personal traits. So all of these things start with knowing who you are and knowing yourself. That's very important. So some of the common questions, tell me about yourself. Again, I prefer a more behavioral question, but a lot of employers do ask this. So again, make sure that what you answer is job related. They're not looking for you to say, well, I'm one of 5 children and I have 3 brothers and married. Those are the things that's irrelevant to the job. So really what they're looking for is your educational background, maybe some experience that relates to the position or skills, your career goals, your strengths. You need to provide at least 2 to 3 examples and know why they're your strengths and how they've helped you be successful and how you've developed that strength. Now, your weaknesses, you want to be honest. You want to try to pick a weakness that's not a horrible weakness, like I'm always late all the time or something like that. What I like to see, if we are discussing your weaknesses, is maybe something that you have been working on and how you have accomplished that, or how you're working towards that success, because it shows an employer that you're willing to take feedback and you're willing to work on that and that you're coachable. So that is something that I really prefer to see. Another example, or to describe more what behavioral questions are, most interviews ask this because we feel that a behavioral-based question is going to show us that if you have done this behavior in the past, then you're more than likely to do it in the future. So I'm going to ask a specific question about a time. Tell me about a time when you recognize a potential problem as an opportunity. What did you do? Tell me about a time when you had to sell an item to an individual and they weren't interested. So I'm asking you for a specific example to make sure that you have performed that task, and most likely you'll do the same with us if we hire you. Behavioral questions are very good for interviewers to ask because it doesn't give you the opportunity to just answer yes or no. It gives us more information and it gives us more ways to dig in further on that skill set. And each of them have a specific task, or excuse me, a specific trait that they're looking for. So in these examples, you see one is looking if someone's assertive, if you have good time management skills. In my line of work, maybe it's, do you have a good customer service acumen? Are you good at sales? So everything is looking at for a specific competency. That's what the employers are looking for. Some of the ways that you can answer those is just to really look at the acronym STAR. So for example, if you're asking somebody, if you're being asked a question, how to describe a situation when you completed a task successfully, first you have to tell us, what was the situation? I was trying to develop a new filing system. Okay, so the task was to do X, Y, Z, eliminate the paper files. The action is, what I did is I created an Excel spreadsheet, and the result was now they were able to update it online, the customers. It was a great system, and now it's being used in the future. So we really want to think of the situation, and it's perfectly okay to take a moment to think about situation. I would much rather you tell me a real situation, one that's well thought out, a good example, by pausing for a few moments, and then telling me the situation. It's better than just blurting something out. I have had experiences where, for example, I had a candidate tell me a customer service example, and yet the example they gave was a poor example of how they managed the situation. Whereas if he had taken a moment to think about it, he probably would have given me a better example. And then this allows us the opportunity to ask you more questions. But if you remember STAR, that's pretty much what we're looking for, and that's how you're going to be guided to that question.
If I may interject, in working with employers, they're typically telling us that they're using more behavioral or situational questions more often. There are some traditional interview questions that are also answered. But the idea here is that at some point you've experienced some type of situation or behavior or experience. So if you can't always think about a situation that's work related, understand that you can, pull from work experiences, internship experiences, volunteer experiences, classroom projects, your leadership experience on campus. So there should be various situations that you can pull from. And if at some point you don't have a good example and you don't know how to answer the question, it's always best to be honest and say, Kim, at the moment, I can't think of a good example. Can we move on to the next question? And if time permits, we can come back to that question. And this goes to say for all questions that an employer asks you, if you can't come up with an example at the moment, it's best to be honest and not make something up, because the employers can tell when you're making things up. So make sure that you're honest at all times when answering questions.
And something I wanted to add too, these are kind of hard to prepare for. So the way to do that is, as we mentioned in the very beginning, is you need to know the position. You need to know what they're looking for. So if they're looking for a specific trait, then the best way to prepare is to think of an example when you illustrated that task. And so when you are asked in the interview, you go, you know what, I did have that happen to me, and this is what happened. So that's a way to prepare for it, so you have those examples in your back pocket.
So we've talked about the various stages of the interview so far. We talked about the day before, during the interview, when you're exchanging information, and now here comes the closing. It's very important that you make a strong closing, because several candidates don't take the opportunity to make a strong closing. And so you want to make sure that at the end of the interview, if an employer says, those are all the questions we have for you today, is there anything else you'd like to add? Or perhaps, there was something you wish we asked you that we didn't, and do you have questions? You want to make sure you take the opportunity to make a strong closing. And the closing could be something as simple as, Kim, thank you so much for the opportunity for interviewing with me today. I really enjoyed learning about your management trainee position. I feel really strongly that my academic experience and my internship experience in retail and customer service will be great assets to this position. I do hope that you will consider it. And then you can move on to asking questions. This is another area where, unfortunately, some candidates don't ask questions, and employers really expect you to ask questions because it shows that you're interested in the position, it shows that you know the job search etiquette, and also it allows you an opportunity to interview the employer. So similarly to how employers are going to interview you, this is also your opportunity to learn more about an organization and ask them about their company culture, ask them informed questions that is going to assist you and help you in making informed decisions should you choose to work with that organization. So oftentimes students ask us, well, what do I ask an employer? Typically you want to ask a few questions. You don't want to bombard them with too many. I think 2 to 3 is okay. Yep. Make a list of questions ahead of time, because sometimes employers, such as Martin, I know, presents a lot of information during her candidates, and therefore you may not have any questions. So you want to make sure you make a list of questions. I know that you can ask about 3 on average. I think it's to ask. We provided some sample questions here in our presentation that are good questions to ask. I always say if there's one question you have time to ask for, it should be, what's the next step in the process? I think that's a great question. I think asking what's the next step and when can I expect to hear from you is also a great question to ask. It will allow you to get a better sense as to when you can expect to hear from them, when you might follow up with them. And also you could say something like, Kim, I'm really excited about this opportunity. Can you let me know when the next step in the interview process is? And also, should I have questions, what's the best way to reach you? And that will allow an employer to give you their preference as to how you should reach them or how not you should reach out to them. But it also gives you an opportunity following steps. You definitely want to ask informed questions, so definitely asking questions that are not too obvious will also showcase to an employer that you.
And additionally, when you are asking for the next step, that is a close too, because it's showing how interested you are in the opportunity and showing that you're eager for another step. So that's another way to close if you're too, if you don't want to ask it as directly as we talked earlier.
After the interview, this is part of making a lasting impression. You want to make sure that we've already talked about asking questions, but you want to thank them with a firm handshake. And if you have various people interviewing, you want to thank and handshake everyone. Have great eye contact and a smile. And you want to make sure that you have their business cards. And if you didn't have opportunity to ask for the business card, you can call the receptionist or speak to the receptionist on your way out to make sure you have the names and the contact information of the individuals who interviewed you, because you want to ensure that you send them a thank you. It could be a thank you letter, a thank you card, a thank you email. Same day or next day is the proper protocol. And in that thank you, you want to make sure that, number one, you thank them for the time and opportunity they gave you to interview for the position. You also may want to reiterate anything that you discussed or any highlights of your experience. And you also want to ensure them that you're still very interested in the position. If needed, and if the employer said it was perfectly fine for you to follow up, you can certainly follow up given the information that you gathered from the interview. So this is kind of a way to kind of close that interview process to make sure that you do all the various steps that employers are looking for as their candidate.
And absolutely. And the follow-up piece I'd like to address a little bit, because I think it's perfectly appropriate to follow up, and hopefully the recruiter is giving you some guidelines as to when they'll make their decision. So be sure you're professional in that follow-up, that if they say, for example, I'll get back to you by Wednesday, maybe give a day or two after Wednesday if you haven't heard anything. Follow up via email or phone if you can, and it gives you an opportunity again to reiterate, I'm very interested in the position. I know you were looking to make a decision by Wednesday. I'm wondering if you've had the opportunity to do that. I would love to inquire about what the next step may be. So that's a very professional way to follow up. Just don't stalk the recruiter. Don't call them over and over again or email them over and over again or get frustrated, because they will get back to you. I think recruiters pride themselves in continuing that candidate care and that conversation. But also, if you follow up, it shows your interest. And whereas another candidate may not do that, and that might help you have a leg up. So I think tying it up with a bow from the candidate perspective is really important, and the thank you is very important as well.
Perfect. In conclusion, these are just some basic interviewing tips to help you land your first professional job or your dream job. But in addition, you want to come in for in-depth assistance here at the Career Center. We offer mock interviews. That's a wonderful way of getting interview practice. It's probably one of the best things that you can do while a student here at Cal State Fullerton is to come in and do a practice mock interview. We also have Interview Stream, which is an online tool that allows you to practice from home via webcam. Networking is key to get that insider perspective. Come in and speak to our college career specialists to get more industry knowledge as you prepare for that interview. And also remember that preparing for the interview is the most important thing to do, because interviewing is a crucial part of getting the job. We want to remind you that the Career Center is here to assist you. Here's our contact information. You can schedule one-on-one appointments for coaching for some of these resources that we went over. Thank you for your time, and we hope that you found this information useful as you go through your job search process.
Absolutely, and good luck.